Well, as I said, today is the Ask Me Anything Sunday. Those of you who have been here for this in previous years know that this is our third time doing this. You also know that this is the most nervous you get me during the whole year. Christmas Eve is easy compared to Ask Me Anything. Christmas Eve, I have my papers in front of me and my precious, precious writing words that I can refer to if I go too far off script. And Brian and I have rehearsed everything, and I know what the choir is going to do. I know where the liturgists are. I sort of know what to expect. And that's how I like things. I am type A in that sense, that I like to have a nice little list that I can work my way down. And then once a year, I set all of that aside, and we just see what happens. And as you have seen in previous years, again, for those of you who were here, and those of you who weren't, you can know this. Questions range from how did you and Julia meet to who is God and everything in between. So feel free to ask me anything. Now, you can ask anything. However, I do not guarantee clear answers, nor do I exclude the ability. I retain the right to say, I don't know. And I think that's a powerful answer at times, because there are questions in the world. The risk of me standing up as pastor of this congregation and saying, oh, ask me everything, anything, is that it implies that I have answers for all of these things. And I am not different than you. I, too, have lots of questions that I cannot fully answer. But I will do my best. I will offer at least what I can think of, or what the church has said historically, and some of the struggles with it. Or, as I did several times in seminary, when a professor would look at me and go, Mr. Roberts, what do you think that Amos was talking about when he said, I will put my head down? I don't know. This happens, and this is the life of the church. So just to get us started, I've not seen this, but I had one that was handed to me last Sunday. So let's see who and what we start with this afternoon, or this morning. Oh, Christina Langle asks, Jeffrey Epstein and his suicide. When I first heard the news, I was elated, and then I felt bad and sad for being glad that someone died. How do you balance the joy and sadness when a man accused of such acts takes his own life? Well, that's a nice, easy question to start with. Can everyone hear what the question was there, familiar with this? How to balance the joy and sadness when a man accused of such horrible things takes his own life. So a few pieces that come to mind, and I have to say, I had a very similar reaction to that news. There's a piece of me that, and this is not necessarily like the Reverend Mark Roberts piece of me, but there was a piece of me that said good riddance. Right? Like, this is not the type of person as the father of a young child that I want around my child. And there was a piece of me that had that vindictive moment, essentially. And I, too, also felt like, oh, but wait, all life has value. All people include a spark of the divine. All people are capable thereof. This is where, for me, I would say my prayer life actually is very important. Because we're going to start with one of these that I don't have a real easy answer for, but I know that I can go in prayer and say, God, you know my conflicted emotions here. You know my feelings about this situation, about what this man is accused of doing, and you know that he too was created by and brought forth by. And he is far from the first person to reject or so deeply bury the spark of the divine within himself and give way to horrific. If sin is about separation from others, and sin is about separation from our own best interests and our own self, he clearly had separated himself from others. He had clearly separated himself from his own best interests. But he is hardly the first sinner that we have known in this world. And if I believe in anything, oh God, about you, it is that you are capable of forgiveness that goes well beyond what I am capable of. So there's a piece of me that has to hand all of this type of question over to God. Because for me to say simply, well, good riddance to bad rubbish, or oh no, it's all good now because God has forgiven him. Either one of those answers is way too simple. Instead, I find myself wrestling with it and asking God for forgiveness. So there you go. There's an answer. Okay. John, I knew you had a question. I thought I saw your hand start to edge up as I was starting the introduction. Go ahead, John.
I'd like to discuss the two things that we wrestle with all the time. One is doubt, and the other is faith. And doubt is the destroyer of faith. We come in faith with doubt because we're not capable of understanding everything that is put before us. And it causes doubt when we hear God's word and the faith that we need. How do we reconcile this? It's a huge problem for me, and I'm probably sure most people have that problem.
Long ago, I saw a series of quotes by Mother Teresa, of all people, talking about how she reconciled doubt and faith. And for me, it resonated. It may not for you, John. And her argument was that doubt is a part of her faith. That you cannot simply have this, hand all things that we know to be true over to God and allow God to handle it. That doubt is part of our human creation and part of our human experience. And therefore, doubt actually allows us to more clearly ask the questions that we need to engage with God. The doubt is sort of that aspect of our faith life. Because if we didn't have doubt, it would imply that we understood everything and we believed all things. And without that, then we're edging close to that whole Adam and Eve's mistake of thinking that they would have all knowledge, they would know all things. I really don't know that I can say that I would personally believe that doubt is the opposite of faith. I think that doubt is an aspect of it. I think fear is the opposite of faith. Or fear is closer to the opposite, where fear locks us in place, and fear prevents us from being able to even look at our own lives or look at other people's existence without immediately falling back into whatever little shelter we make for ourselves. And that fear is the piece that over and over blocks our faith development. Doubt, and this is in my own experience, doubt can, for me, spur me forward and make me more interested in figuring out, well, now wait a second, how do people, I can't possibly be the first person to wonder how Earth was created in 7 days according to Genesis, and yet science gives me a complete, so how do you reconcile this? And that's a question of doubt, leading me into an exploration of where faith is found. So to the question, I just don't see it as clear of a line there. I see doubt as part of the bigger aspect of faith. And I think the quote from the statements from Mother Teresa helped me with that, because she has been, in some traditions, in the Catholic Church in particular, obviously, held up as an exemplar of faith. And then these writings came out, and they were sort of like, well, what is this? But I think that's actually a faith honestly lived also. So there we go. Make of that what you will, John. By the way, if you haven't noticed, what happens in this every year is you get 8-word questions and sermons, mini sermons that come back your way. So I apologize for the length of that, John. But again, faith and doubt for me, they're sort of closer together. Hearts and minds. Oh, there's a question that came in. Jill was the bearer of the emails. I wonder who ended up with these. These were emails to Karen Martin. I didn't see them, but I knew Karen couldn't be here. Thank you, Jill. Okay, here we go. This comes from Sherry Pace. Are Mormons considered Christians? FYI, as long as the weather is good, we will be in the Poconos. Season 2, I think we're away the following week, right? I'm not sure if you wanted me to read that second part, but she wrote it on the form, and so... My understanding is that Mormons would consider themselves Christians within the Christian tradition. I'm not trying to call anyone out. I know there are people in this room with experience in the Church of Latter-day Saints. I personally see them as part of the interfaith community. I do not personally believe that the Mormon Church is part of the same Christian church in the way that the Protestant and Catholic communities are, including Greek Orthodox and different pieces like that. I feel like the staff, and this isn't to take away from the Mormon missions that they engage in and interfaith work that they are capable of doing. There was just an article a couple days ago that I read and watched on the Post that they now said that basically any drink that ends in chino cannot be drunk anymore, whether it's caffeinated or not. And there are pieces there where, like, I kind of respect I understand where the dietary rules of the Mormon Church come in. So, like, no cappuccinos, no mochachinos, etc. I understand where the dietary rules come in because, again, Judaism is just chock-a-block full of kosher rules and different pieces like that. But I think that the history of the Mormon Church, as I understand it, and I am not a scholar of this, but that the history of it, particularly its idea of founding in America as a new Israel, and the westward movement of the church as they've been persecuted from land to land, is very separate from the gospel of Jesus Christ that we know. And for those for whom the Book of Mormon brings value and meaning to them, so be it. But I see that not as holy writ scripture, the way that the Roman Catholic Church will have different books. They have different, there's what we call the Apocrypha. They have a deuterocanonical section. So they have more books in the Bible. But that seems easier for me to accept in that tradition than the Mormon Church. So to the question specifically, I personally don't see them as Christians in the way that I see the wider Christian community. I do think that I shouldn't address this to you, Jill. It wasn't your question. I do see them as part of our interfaith brothers and sisters, and therefore it is our work to engage with them and discover what we can of God. Okay, were there two here? Oh, there is another one. Okay. Oh, Andy. Okay, Andy Johansen. Hey, from a Christian point of view, what is the meaning of life? I'm going to take his second question because he has a second one here, which is another question of what is the meaning of sin? And Paul looked at it as missing the target. I already talked about that one, so I'm just going to put a check, and that's that. I see sin as separation from our own self, sin as separation from others, and sin as separation from the will of God. And how that gets manifest is different for everybody. All of us at times do things that are not in our own best interest, things like that. All of us at times distance ourselves from God. God never leaves us, but we are capable of distancing ourselves.
So if you know it's a sin, it's a sin.
Kind of. I mean, that's part of it. Like, cause, and I don't mean this to you, Mike, but like, have we not experienced that feeling at times when it's like, kind of know? Well, Paul says it this way. Like, I know this isn't right, and yet here I am doing it anyway. Right? Like, that is, I think, a much healthier way for the church to come towards the idea of sin versus us trying to make a list of 600 things that we're all going to say, like, well, obviously eating spicy Doritos on a Sunday is a sin, right? Like, you all agree with me on that. No? Well, I'm a pastor, so guess what? It's now a sin, people. So I think it's much more important to hear that inner voice.
So if you don't know it's a sin, is it still a sin?
I think the community of faith, if you surround yourself with it, might help you discover it. I think that the word of Scripture might help you discover something about this. If you can discover that you have separated yourself, even if you don't discover it, yes, I would still say it's a sin, because God would recognize it as a sin. That you have separated yourself from others, intentionally or unintentionally. Okay, but the first question, what is the meaning of life? Didn't I say I could say I don't know? This is why I should screen these questions.
Or here. He's not here.
I don't What's that? The tape that's up here? Just to like edit it out. I don't know the answer to that. I think there's something there about relationship that is central to who we are, both as people of faith and in our own lives. And that I don't know how to articulate more than that because it isn't necessarily marriage specifically, it isn't necessarily about family specifically, but it's about depth of honesty and relationship that we can build with the world around us. And I recognize that I have in-laws and cousins and others for whom they would say that that is found not in this type of church setting, but it is found in a yoga setting, or it is found in hiking, or in doing the trail in Spain, the Via de... Yeah, thank you. Yes, that. And that is much more of a community event, even though they walk the path by themselves. That they find this ability to journey together, and their life finds meaning because of the relationships they build. I don't know that that's actually the answer I want written down anywhere as to the answer of life, but I feel like there's something there about relationships, that we do not walk alone. And just telling you that I answered it perfectly, but you don't remember what I said. Okay.
Another word that goes with that is purpose.
Purpose, right. Meaning and purpose. Thank you, John. What else? We just started off with simple questions.
We gotta ask Andy next time he's here.
Exactly.
Everybody ask Andy.
You know, every now and again, Andy is the guest preacher. All right? And so we could just say, hey, Andy, before you start your sermon, we have just one question. Kim, go ahead.
I have a simple question that I might have known at one point, but I can't remember it. When did you actually know that you wanted to be a pastor?
I sort of rediscover that every week, Kim, but it's like, no, to be a pastor specifically, like I knew from high school on that I was dedicated to like Christian ministry and mission. And so you know that I worked in Christ House, which is a homeless facility for men and women in Washington, D.C. that had religious overlays to it. I worked at Columbia Road Health Services with documented and undocumented immigrants, low-income primary care clinic, again, with a Christian organization wrapped around it. I volunteered for 2 years through the United Church of Christ year-long volunteer program out of school. And like those types of Christian life were my ministry. And then towards the end of 2004, shortly after Julia and I got married, I kind of realized I wanted to go and get either a master's in public health or a master's in divinity or a master's in administration or business MBA, in order to come back to a place like Christ House or Columbia Road Health Services as a more efficient manager, organized in that way. But I didn't really want to go just to a business school. I figured I wanted to go to a seminary and hear the words of faith and see how that can apply back to what I was doing. And I went to Eden Seminary in St. Louis, which it bills itself as a school of the church. That they have social outreach and mission programs and different things like that, and social justice work, but their primary focus is to train pastors. And I chose Eden partially because their missions director was awesome and actually cared about what this would mean for Julia's life and not just my life. And she was the only one of all the schools that took any interest in what Julia might do in St. Louis, and that certainly mattered. Partially because I knew that I'd been raised in the church up through high school and then had some habitat programs and stuff in college and things like that. But it sort of lost the understanding of what a congregation was about. And Eden promised that they would help with that. And I fell back in love with the church in seminary and this type of ministry, not to take anything away from nonprofit administration or the other pieces. But I fell back in love with the church because for all of, and I'm not speaking of anything or anyone in particular here, but like for all of our struggles or all the things that we sometimes get wrong, we get a lot of stuff really right in the church. And it is a joy to see people come together from different backgrounds, with different understandings of what we're doing, and attempt to work towards some common goals. And so by the end of my first year in seminary, it was clear to me that I actually wanted to become a pastor of a church, not to go back into nonprofit administration with a church wrapping around it, basically. But then there are weeks where it's like, the joy of having more of a 8 to 5 job kicks in a little bit. Of like you put the voicemail on voicemail and you're done until you come in the next day. And I recognize that isn't true for many of our jobs these days. So I would say like literally 2007. There, that's how I could answer that. 2007, Kim. But all of that sort of fit into. And when I say at the end of every service, at the end of the benediction, I'll say, and go with us in our respective ministries this week, I mean that. I mean that we have respective ministries. It's not just that I am the minister, it is that we are all ministers of the gospel. And some of us find that in our homes, some of us find that in school settings, some of us find that in retirement, some of us find that here at the church, but wherever that may be, to go forth and be a minister. And I think part of the reason I say that is because that's where I started to, that my ministry didn't start in this type of setting. That's easier than asking me in love. So thank you. I appreciate that. Gee.
Where is God in all the violence going on in our country?
And in the world, probably, too.
In the world.
Yeah. So if you couldn't hear that, her question was, where is God in all the violence going on in our country and in the world? That's one I actually give a lot of thought to. I really do. William Sloane Coffin was the pastor of Riverside Church in New York City. It overlooks the square. What's the
Central Park.
Central Park, like Center Square. It's not called Center Square. It's Times Square. Yes, that's what I was vivid in my mind there. Overlooks the church. It overlooks Central Park. It is the Protestant cathedral that the Rockefellers built and donated the land for to rowdy old cathedral, European grand cathedrals. Sloane Coffin was the pastor there for about 10 years. In his tenure there, his son was killed in a car crash, and his son drowned in Massachusetts Bay. The car went off the bridge. He was unable to be revived. And when William Sloane Coffin took the pulpit again after a time away and came back to speak of this grief, what he spoke of was that when the waters closed over the roof of Andrew's car, the gods was the first heart to break. And for me, that was such a poignant reminder of when, for me, like the answer to your question would be, when the violence that racks our country is taking place or is happening anywhere in the world, it is God's heart that breaks first. Because God knows through the life of Jesus what it means to lose and to suffer and to struggle. And that if the cross meant anything, it was that God understands the pain that we too experience. And you'll note in my answer, I'm not going to say like God, and I said this last week in church, like I don't buy into the idea that God uses this violence or God creates this violence as part of some overall plan. I see this as God walking this journey with us. And then being there to console us, being there to strengthen us, and being there to show us a better way, but giving us the freedom to still make horrible decisions. And then each time, God's heart breaks. And when we pull ourselves together and we move forward, God dances with joy and walks forward with us again. But like that's how I would. That's another lesson I've learned from these things over time, is that suddenly it's like, oh wait, we have a 2-hour worship service. Chill, go ahead.
So I am familiar with families that are Christians but are more of the fundamentalists, like this is what the Bible says.
So right.
And then that leads them to decisions of when family members don't follow those rules, then they no longer are part of the family, or there's a time of like, they don't call it shunning, but that sort of.
Yeah, but it's what it feels like probably.
Right. And I just struggle with like how in their mind when you have Jesus as your role model, and actually speaking of like hearing what Jack said today, like the scripture, it was like, really, did they read that scripture? But then I think, well, maybe they look at it so literally, like how do you? And so I never really, I just sort of listen because I just don't feel like I can be.
Exactly. Listen or be shunned, right? Like it's,
Right. Because I'm going to say, well,
call me.
what would Jesus do? Like that's what I'm like. And
Right.
so I'm not sure like how to, take that and what do I do with that information, I guess, when someone shares.
I have about half of my family that should get together with half of your family, it sounds like. We should just let them go have a picnic somewhere, because they'll get along splendidly. I have cousins who are pastors in fundamentalist Foursquare churches. Foursquare is it's a denomination. It is, I'm blanking on the term for it, but it is a fundamentalist, literalist reading of the Bible denomination. And they echo what you were saying. And they, just to be clear, like, they don't see me as an ordained minister of the gospel because of several things that I believe. Because I believe that God's heart lives within all people, and that all are created in the divine image, including Jeffrey Epstein. And how we live into that image may be very misguided. Like, they reject that claim. And because I embrace that, they also are deeply opposed to childhood baptism, or infant baptism. And so I'm shunned for that purpose too. And I'll say, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say it this way. It sucks. It really does. Like, I don't use that term lightly in a church setting, but like, I really, really dislike it because they are family and they're my cousins, and I grew up with them with grandma. And we are so diametrically opposed to what this is. And yes, they would read this passage literally. Wheat and chaff get separated, right and wrong get separated, and of course they are the ones who are empowered to make the decision about who is right and who is wrong. I look at this very differently. Well, okay, wait, show me in the gospel where Jesus said, oh, you have done too many bad things, therefore I cannot eat a meal with you. Show me where Jesus said, oh, yeah, you're a sinner. I'm going to Paul as I say that. Sorry about that, Paul. Therefore, I don't want to see you. I don't want to heal you. I don't want to be near you. Like, even on the cross, a man who never went to church, criminal, by all means, a man who never went to church, never was baptized, never helped with a mission project, looked at Jesus and said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And what did Jesus say? He said, no, you die on your own. No, of course he didn't. He said, today you will be in my Father's kingdom with me on this day. And that is the Jesus that I read in the gospel. I don't see where the shunning fits in. You can get a little bit of this from Paul, but like in the gospels, I don't see it. I don't get it. And yet it is a very real expression of Christianity in this world, or at least of their version of Christianity. And it, for me, like, it hurts personally because it means that when we're together, I don't even want to talk about like how awesome my church is or all these things that we do, because it's just, I might as well just, like, I don't have a great answer behind it, but I understand the question. Okay, time for one more, because we really are pushing it here. Or am I silenced? Oh, Gideon.
In your comment before the gospel, I believe you said that God raises up prophets today. And so the question is, when God raises up a prophet, how do we know? And more specifically, is a prophet for everybody? Or does God raise up prophets with missions for certain people?
Well, John knows we spent an hour and a half this past Tuesday at the Bible study going in circles on that very question. What do we say of prophets that go beyond the prophets that are listed in the Old Testament here and things like that? And I really struggled with coming up with modern prophets, like today, alive right now, that would fit the criteria of speaking to everyone. I did have lots where I think, well, okay, so some baseline pieces. There are lots of people listed in the Old Testament who say they were prophets and then are proven not to be a prophet. And the acid test to tell if someone's a real prophet or a false prophet is, did what they say was going to happen actually happen? And if not, then odds are that that wasn't the word of God they were expressing. It was their own value, their own idea, their own expression of something that was coming forth. But that's done in hindsight, basically. And it makes it tough for me to say, in today's world, who is being a prophet? Now, you could prophecy. We all can prophecy, and this is the easy one. Like, I don't need a crystal ball in prophecy to do that anyway. prophet would just look at the times and anticipate, knowing what we do of how God expresses God's self in the world, what might be coming next. So Jeremiah can go and see what was happening in his world, the destruction of widows and poor and things like that, and go, I don't think God's going to let this stand. I think the Babylonians are going to wipe us out and send us into exile. I think we can pretty easily today look at our own setting and go, I think that our national discourse is going to get worse before it gets better. And I don't actually know how it's going to get better, but I think it's going to get worse. And that is, on one hand, a prophetic statement, because it could be that next week we wake up and everything is great, and we all agree on everything again, and on we go as a country, but looking at the sign of the times, I think not. So I don't know how to answer it for today. What I do know is that in relatively modern history, I can look at members of the confessing church in Germany, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer and others who I believe were offering a prophetic view of what it meant to be a Christian practicing under a Nazi regime, and how you stand in resistance to that and in opposition to that in order to offer the love of God to people who were shunned and then being killed, and that is a prophet in the midst, speaking truth into a situation that they were incapable of changing. Bonhoeffer is a complicated person. I don't mean to simplify it that much, but I think there are people like that that are much more modern. But again, I took an hour and a half with John, and Roberta was there, and we went in big moving circles about how can we find providence. But I do believe that God is still active in the world, and if God is still speaking, as the denomination says, that we should still be listening and responding to that word. And hopefully there is some prophecy that comes from what God says to us. Okay. Oh, John, I just said last question. Go ahead.
I think that even during the time of the prophets for the Jews, they were not understood by people to be the prophet at that time. They ended up being prophets.
Right. Yeah, many of the prophets in their own time.
We're the same prophets now. We got prophets, but we don't recognize them. We don't really see them.
Because it's you see it in hindsight.
They live next door. We don't know.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you all. This is very nerve-wracking for me, but I appreciate the opportunity to do some Q&A, and we'll go from there. I believe our next piece is a hymn, right? Why don't you stretch your legs, let's stand, let's sing together.